we had a couple more CHIPS Act awards this week. Following the suit at TSM, it seems like this $6 billion is the range. Everybody's going to get $6 billion. You get $6 billion, and you get $6 billion, and you get $6 billion. Oh, and Intel, since you're the most important, you can have $8 billion. I don't know, Pat. I mean, look, I think you and I have both been pretty steadfast about this kind of correlation that exists between memory technology and AI chips, and that building the advanced, mostly we're talking about HBM right now, at scale is going to be a rate limiter for the success of AI silicon, because you need enough memory for all the throughput that you're going to require to to deliver on the promise of AI. So who's building that? Well, in the U.S., I mean, it's primarily, Micron is the U.S.-based leader, and of course, Samsung is another major player in this space. So both companies are getting more than $6 billion. Samsung's going to be expanding its local here, Pat, presence, both in Taylor and Austin. It's largely going to focus on what people expect to be its 4 and then later 2 nanometer process, and its most advanced, process for memory. Now, Pat, interestingly enough, all the news keeps banging on the fact that, U.S.-based manufacturing of silicon has dropped from 37 to 12% over the last 3 decades. Interestingly enough, though, by the way, this is a reminder. You and I both know this, but for everybody out there, the actual percentage of leading edge built here in the U.S. is
very small.
Like zero. It's negligible is basically the amount. And so even when we try to like when Reuters tries to say it's 12%, that's mostly older nodes above 7. So the fact is that, what we're trying to solve, for those that kind of have forgotten, because it took a couple years from the time that the CHIPS Act was announced to the time that these grants started going out, we're trying to solve the fact that we have no resiliency outside of Taiwan for anything 7 nanometer or below. So all these grants are heavily focused on those processes, and it's obviously logic and memory. So with TSMC, you're seeing the focus on logic, with Intel logic, with now we're starting to see the memory companies with Samsung and Micron getting substantial awards. And there are others, some of you probably heard of SK. They're not, so far have not been granted any dollars here. But for Micron, it's largely expansion in the Idaho and New York markets. They have a big 4-fab project in New York. So they probably got a lot of support from Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer, for that. We know that New York has an interesting semiconductor kind of out in Albany. We've been to the IBM Research Center there. We spent some time, but they're really trying to be another hub of innovation there. So this is going to obviously expand it. We know that Global Foundries also has a pretty substantial footprint out in that part of the world. But Samsung, it's all Texas, baby. It's all here in Texas. This is where it's all happening. This is where you should move right now, viewers. You should be down here in Austin, as long as you tend to agree with Pat and I's viewpoints. But look, it's moving forward. Awards are being granted. You're talking about, some different timelines with each of them. And so it's going to be several years, though, before we're starting to see the byproducts of these. And by the way, both companies, I think it's Samsung's $40 billion is what they're planning to spend all in. And Micron, I think it's 100 over like 2 decades, though. So good progress on the awards. I'm still wondering at what point we're going to start to see real meaningful production here in the U.S. It's at least a few years out.
Yeah, so memory market is back, and for those who have not been following for the last 40 years, memory is hit and miss. I mean, you're either in an oversupply or an undersupply. When you're in oversupply, your customers are driving rapid price cuts, and it's ridiculous. And we saw negative gross margins for Hynix, Samsung, and Micron. But memory's back, baby. Why? Because all of the platforms that it goes into are gaining demand, and all 3 of these companies pulled back on their capital expenditure, and even pulling back on the amount of hours that they run their foundries. So prices are going up. You may have seen that Micron basically announced they were sold out of HBM3 for the year, right? And it's, it was March when they made that announcement. We saw Samsung come in from a P&L standpoint on semiconductor. Now, they don't break out memory versus logic, or sorry, memory versus things like processors, but you just know that most of that was memory, because most of the processors they manufacture, they consume themselves. So it's great to see this memory this back. And oh, by the way, wait until AI PC and AI smartphone hits in with all this on-device models. It's going to be absolutely bonkers, because you need more memory to do the processing of it, and you need more storage to store the 10, 20, 30 models that are going to be sitting on your phone. And then from a Samsung standpoint, here in Tyler, it's super exciting. And essentially what that means is that you'll have Intel coming out with 18A first here in the United States. You'll have 2 nanometer coming out in Taylor by 2026. And then I think TSMC said by 2028, they would have 2 nanometer running in Arizona. I'm still piecing together, if TSMC is being conservative on their dates. I had originally thought that to get the money, they would have had to do bleeding edge here, and 2028 for Samsung 2 nanometer is anything but bleeding edge. It would be 1 or 1.5.
It'd be like 7 right now, right? It'd be like saying we're at the leading with like 7.
Probably more like 5, right?
Okay.
3 nanometer is leading edge. And by the way, this nanometer stuff is fake. I'm tired of doing air quotes around it, but if somebody can use an electron microscope and show me 2 nanometer gate width, then I will retract that.
Well,
so
2.1.
yeah, macro. Sorry, what's that?
I was joking, like 220, 221.
Yeah,
thanks, Mr. Mom.
Yeah,
yep,
exactly. So macro here, US by 2030 they want to do 20% of chips here in the United States, and that's how this all comes together.